It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I often say that we're fighting the battles of the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s. And recently, Bernie Sanders held a hearing on legislation that would bring to the U.S. a 32-hour work week. The idea that, as technology comes on board, as AI, as robotics, as automation, as all of this stuff comes, we should start talking about shortening the work week so people can do other things. Wow. The blowback, the outrage, the comments, not just by the pro-business crowd, but by working people that I've run into, the comments that I've gotten, that I've seen, quite remarkable, given the fact that, when you look at the polling, workers are in favor of a shorter work week. Why? So they can spend more time with their families. They can spend more time doing what they're doing. And it got me thinking, this comment that I make quite often, that we're refighting or living through the good old days of the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s, alluding to the fact that we're kind of reliving the 1880s and 1890s, the Gilded Age, the robber baron era. I now have much, much more respect for the people of that era, because understand, in this country, workers have always been, abused. Work from the typical workday used to be sun up to sundown, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. Usually you got half a day on Sunday for churching. But most working people, their lives were about survival. And you worked until you died. And that adage of, in the question, do we work to live or live to work? We're in a moment right now where people are starting to say, especially coming out of the pandemic, that I work so that I'm able to live, that I'm able to pay my rent and my bills and to be able to have a decent life. That's the reason we work. We don't wake up every day just to work. And I find it interesting that one of the comments that grabbed my attention was someone said, do you believe, now this is one of the conservatives out there, do you believe that Bernie Sanders wants to mandate overtime after 8 hours? And I'm like, I'm a union guy. My entire life has been overtime after 8 hours. I can't believe anybody wouldn't demand overtime after 8 hours. I can't believe that we as a working class of this country haven't been demanding this for decades. That only now, because of the UAW and Sean Fain, are we having this conversation. Now understand, I've talked about shorter work weeks for years on my show, saying, look, back in the 50s, there was a union pushing the idea of a 24-hour work week because technology they saw in the radio industry was going to kill jobs. Remember, there were plenty of jobs. One of the parts of corporate speak that I love the most are the words synergy and redundancy. We need to take advantage of synergy and we need to weed out redundancy. And what both of those mean are get rid of people. That means eliminate jobs so that there's more profit, so that the workers that are left will be more productive. Now, look, Sanders is going with AI coming, with all this technology coming. Individual workers are going to be more productive. This might be a way of that wealth, that productivity actually getting into the hands of workers. Saying, look, we're going to make it to 32-hour work week. So overtime after 32, but after 8 every day. So we just don't go, oh, we'll have a 4-day work week. Everyone will just work 10 hours. So, I got to thinking about the fact that I don't think we really understand what it took to get what we take for granted. One of the little things that we do here in the program and have done for years is labor history in two. It's on about 70, 75 radio stations right now. It's one of the things that we play quite often on our radio affiliates. And it's 2 minutes of, hey, today in labor's history, this is what happened. And the 8-hour day was part of that. Because remember, in the 19th century, we're talking long, dangerous hours under the guise of, liberty of contract. If you're willing to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages and deplorable conditions, it's your freedom, it's your liberty, it's your right. And we're hearing a lot of those same frames today. What's interesting to me as I'm hearing the arguments against uh, overtime after 8 and a 32-hour work week, oddly enough, seems a lot like the arguments they were making back in the 1880s. As the Knights of Labor and the IWW and the International Workmen's Association and the unions of the day were fighting for first the 12-hour day, then the 10-hour day, and then, gasp, an 8-hour day under the banner of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest. Here's the kicker: 8 hours for what we will. Saying, yeah, we should get a good night's sleep, put in a fair day's pay, a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, and then enjoy our life, part of our family, whatever. And I find it interesting that the same voices going, how could we possibly go to a 32-hour work week? How could we possibly impose this on business? Oh, they'll never get the work done. The exact same arguments they made back in the day. Now, as I've always said, um, you need to have government set the rules. It's like any game, there've got to be rules to the game. And it wasn't until we got the Fair Labor Standards Act passed that you saw the 40-hour work week go across not just across the country, but across the world. We set that. And look, unions did a better job of fighting for overtime over after 8, and instead of just overtime after 40, you got Saturdays were time and a half, Sundays were double time, that kind of stuff in contracts, and that's fabulous. What I also love is hearing the people who hate unions the most telling us that, well, unions should be able to negotiate this stuff for you, even though in the private sector you're only talking about 6.5% of the private sector. They know not going to happen. And what labor understands is they need the legislation, because we saw a boom of organizing for workers when the floor was set for everyone. We saw a boom of organizing when there was legislation to help, which is why we need a push on the legislative front. But I look at this moment and I go, how did we get a working class that so identifies with corporate interests? How did we get a working class who, their parents, their grandparents lived through what was a difficult era, built the most prosperous working class in the history of humanity, and now having it taken from them, are not ready to fight? It's amazing. Now Sanders said that his bill would move us to a 32-hour work week with no loss in pay. And he said, look, this isn't radical. He said, what is radical is the fact that over $50 trillion in wealth has been redistributed from the bottom 90% of people in this country, the people who create the wealth, to the top 1% over the last 50 years. And he said simply, look, it's time that the financial gains from these new technologies and all of this stuff benefit the workers, not the 1%. And as I've been saying for a long time, I hope this, and I want this technological shift, I want this advancement, I want this moment to not be like all of the ones of the past, where wealth has been created off the backs of workers who don't get to share in it. Now, Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, had what I thought was an incredible statement, because we hear people all the time, well, and I was listening to C-SPAN radio, and there were a bunch of these people, well, none of these young people want to work. They're just lazy. When I went to work, we used to work 12, 14, 16-hour days. And you go, is that right? Did you miss all of your kids' birthdays or just most of them? But Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, said, I agree there is an epidemic in this country of people who don't want to work. But those aren't the blue collar people. Those aren't the working people. The people I'm talking about are the Wall Street freeloaders, the masters of passive income. You go on social media, all you hear from the influencers is, hey, how do you get to this passive income? Basically, how can you screw working people well enough that you never have to work? And I heard that and I'm going, man, that is a perfect frame. Because, I say all the time, you've got the wealth class of this country who, the hardest day's work that they do is moving money from one pocket to the other, from yours to theirs. And this is it in a nutshell. Now, understand, the 32-hour work bill is not going to pass. It's not going to go anywhere. It was really a messaging bill. It's really to begin having the conversation and to get working people to start thinking it's possible to do something different. And look, I know we're stuck in our ways. We're afraid of change. How can we do 40 hours of work in 32 hours? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe that means that the wealth class, these big businesses, are going to have to pay more people. We're going to have to do what past generations were able to do. Have people have jobs. Imagine that. Now, but what about mom and pop? Well, here's the reality. Business models have to change. And legislatively, you can make carve-outs. You can help small business. This could be a way to help small business while leveling the playing field a little bit. Maybe you say, okay, well, you get you get 35 hours or 38 hours. There's a way around this. But the idea that from the beginning, from our business class, no was the response right from the beginning. So the question I have, as this technology comes on board, and it's going to, who should benefit? Who should reap the rewards of the productive gains of massive automation and AI and robotics and all of that? Who should? Should it be the people who own the machines, the people who come up with the machines, or everyone all in between, and the workers as well? And to make sure that the workers don't take it on the chin again. The jobs we need to be creating are good jobs, family-sustaining wage jobs with benefits like health and retirement security, like opportunity for the future. That's what we need to be doing, folks. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
We are AFGE. We support our nation's military and our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders and provide services to our nation's seniors. Across the country and here in Washington, D.C., the American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
So on Friday, you had labor leaders, climate activists, workers, people who care about maybe saving the planet, creating jobs, that kind of stuff. Had a virtual press conference to talk about how in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. They're going to do kind of a joint thing, and that joint thing is going to help create some good jobs in wind and all of that stuff, the offshore wind stuff that we keep hearing about. It might actually get done. I know, shocking as shocking can be, but this is the beginning of how this stuff gets done. So we're going to help save the planet, and I don't know, create good, solid, family sustaining union jobs. And here to share some thoughts on the press conference and maybe where this is going to go, I've asked Erica Hammond to come talk with us. She's the field director for the Climate Jobs Rhode Island program, climatejobsri.org, the name of their organization. Erica, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So walk me through. You had a bunch of, you had Liz Schuler out there from the National AFL-CIO. You had a lot of local labor folks, some other dignitaries. What happened?
So on Friday, we had labor leaders representing hundreds of thousands of workers in both Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, all came together with, like you said, the National AFL-CIO. President Schuler joined us. We had environmental advocates as well, all to unveil this pro-worker plan for New England's offshore wind industry. So it's aimed at creating good union jobs, advancing equity, and tackling the climate crisis all at the same time.
No, look, I don't know anyone who could complain about that, although I'm sure there will be. But on the jobs front, investing in the future of the country, investing in things that we clearly need. They should be good union jobs. They should have strong labor protections. Should be done with a project labor agreement so that they make sure that there's a floor. Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
Absolutely. So the labor leaders, not just the labor leaders, the environmental advocates as well, on this press conference called on developers to commit to strong labor standards and strong equity standards for offshore wind development coming to each of our states. So I'm not sure if viewers are familiar with what's been done already in both of our states, or all of our states, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. But there's a first of its kind joint procurement coordinated by to coordinate up to, I think, about 6 gigawatts of offshore wind. And leaders sent letters to 4 developers who we have reason to believe will be bidding on these projects or procurements, and they've outlined a suite of policies that the states and developers should commit to make sure that these jobs are all high quality union jobs.
It's interesting you say that. How difficult was it to get Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island? I mean, they're all right there. How hard was it to get them on the same page to go, maybe we could go in on this together. Maybe the investments that we make, we scale up, we make bigger, and we all get the benefit. How hard do you think that has been? And or do you have a story on how hard it's been?
Well, at least on our climate jobs front, that has been the easy part. Herding all the cats is what we say, is bringing everybody together. So we, back in January, had a joint meeting with labor leaders, environmental advocates from all of our state coalitions. So when I say state coalitions, I mean climate jobs coalitions in both Mass, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, with our national partners at Climate Jobs National Resource Center. We hosted an in-person meeting here in Rhode Island, which seemed fitting as the first, the birthplace of offshore wind in the U.S. with the Block Island Wind Farm. So we brought everyone together to say, if we're going to hold developers accountable to have these high labor standards, what would we want to see? And it was actually, we pulled in all of our our building trades friends who have enormous amounts of work equity on these projects, our environmental advocates who have been advocating for moving offshore wind forward and taking bold climate action for years. And we just sat down and said, how do we make this happen? So that piece was the easy piece. Now making sure we hold developers accountable and bringing that message to each of our state governments, state agencies. Now that's the next piece, the tricky piece.
No, I mean, the jobs part of this is amazing when you start thinking about the amount of steel that goes into this stuff, the kind of technical know-how that needs to be had by the workers who do this, and the potential, wages that can be earned. And also, for my small business friends, those increased wages that those workers are getting, those are your dollars. That's the money that they spend in your local businesses and help build the local community. So I don't actually see a downside to this. Now, I do have some conservative friends who listen to Donald Trump and say, the windmills kill birds and cause cancer or who knows what other crazy things we hear. But it doesn't sound like there's a downside to this for me.
No, and honestly, the biggest piece, well, not the biggest, it's all important and it's all big, but one of the most important pieces that we want to see in this work is that those labor standards don't just happen for the construction piece. That's a huge piece of it, but we want to see it on the construction, operations, maintenance, supply chain, manufacturing, the transmission upgrades, every single piece of this process, we want to make sure has strong labor standards because that's what keeps the jobs in the US. That's what keeps the jobs local.
No, that's great. And look, it's great to talk about the jobs and rebuilding our infrastructure and all this. But ultimately, the whole idea of doing this, or maybe I'm wrong, but the whole idea of doing this is, maybe, I don't know, saving the planet. Something, helping with the climate, helping create some energy that we can use. That I don't know. We don't need to burn the dirty stuff. Thoughts?
Absolutely. So, at least in New England, we are uniquely positioned for offshore wind. We're the perfect place for it. We have relatively shallow waters on our coastlines. We have some of the strongest winds in the world off of our coasts. This is the biggest climate action that we can take to meet our renewable energy goals. I know Rhode Island has our emissions reduction goals set by the Act on Climate in 2021. I know Massachusetts and Connecticut each have their own emissions reduction goals. We have renewable energy goals. We want to be making sure that we are producing renewable energy, local energy generation here. So we have major I say ambitious, but yet incredibly necessary climate action that we've already planned on taking.
No, and very doable. I mean, that's the thing. But here's the thing: one of the big knocks against wind, much like solar, the sun isn't always shining. Does the wind ever stop in your neck of the woods? Now, look, I've spent a lot of time in all of those states, up and down the eastern seaboard. So, does the wind ever really stop?
The wind in the air, of course, stops at some points, and I can't give you the full science behind it because there are technicians that every time, they talk about these systems and the brains that go into, they call it like the guts and the nacelles inside of these wind turbines are so intelligent. It's incredible really to see this technology at work. These turbines will pick up speed when they need it, when they're detecting certain wind speeds to pick up speed. They'll slow down if those wind speeds get too severe and too serious. They'll hold on to that energy that's been created. They'll stop moving to stop the energy from coming back and forth to the grid. These are things that technicians and engineers and people far outside of my profession and wheelhouse have been thinking about for years. So I can't give you a great answer on that, but I know people who can.
Well, I'm gonna say, look, I've been to New England, and the wind doesn't stop. So it's one of those things where that's the perfect place for it.
Yeah.
Now we've been talking about the jobs, we've been talking about saving the planet, all this stuff, and it all sounds like sunshine and rainbows.
Mhm.
What's the downside? There's got to be someone unhappy about this.
So for us, the only downside to this is if we don't take bold steps to make sure that this work happens here. There are, other countries that have been doing this for decades and have their own workforces that have been doing this for decades. We want to make sure that the work goes to our local communities, our local workforces. There's ironworkers, painters, laborers, electricians, a number of trades, at least on the construction side, that have been doing similar work for decades. There's just now some added components of training that they need to be able to do the same work now out on the water. So we need.
Tell me about your organization, Climate Jobs Rhode Island, and the website climatejobsri.org. How long you guys been doing this? How long is this organizing to get this whole thing put together? How long has this been going on?
So Climate Jobs Rhode Island just had its 3-year anniversary, which is exciting. We're a coalition of more than 30 labor, environmental, and community organizations that are all committed to working together to make sure that Rhode Island is a national leader in the development of a green economy. So what that means, I guess, in normal language, and what that means in practice is that Rhode Island and the nation, as they map out their ambitious climate action plans, we want to make sure that each of those plans, whether it's reducing emissions, increasing our renewable energy supply, we want to make sure that workers and their families are at the center of that entire transition. So
That's
we've had a number of successes in our short life, and I truly think that that's a testament to the broad coalition that we've had from the start, which we have representatives from labor unions and organizations that build, maintain our critical energy infrastructure. We have environmental advocates like Green Energy Consumers Alliance, the Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, and a number of community partners and labor organizations like Forza Laboral, who's an incredible labor organization that's been working to end worker exploitation for nearly 20 years now. They're an incredible, we have a lot of incredible people at our table. And the only way we get this done is if we put all of our heads together and figure out how we do it together, because we can't let the forces divide us or else it doesn't happen.
No, this is amazing. It's amazing to see, labor and climate and environmental groups coming together and saying, "Hey, we're gonna put together a package and move in a direction together." Are there other examples of this in other places of the country where you have this kind of coordination and cooperation to get something done, or is this kind of like a test case?
So, at least in Rhode Island, we like to say that we are the best coalition. We really do have an incredible coalition where labor and environment's working together on many fronts. But no, they're joking aside, there's a great national organization, which is our national organization, Climate Jobs National Resource Center, that has been doing incredibly difficult work to make sure that the right people get in the rooms to form these coalitions in other states. So Massachusetts has a Climate Jobs Massachusetts. Connecticut has the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs. There's a Climate Jobs in Maine, New York, Illinois, and there's many others that are popping up in other places too, or just in its infancy as well. So the goal would be to be in every state.
Outstanding. And look, I'm looking forward to this. I see some of the dates that we need to be looking at. March 27th is evidently the bids are supposed to be in for the joint procurement.
Yeah.
And then the selection of the winning bidder will be in August. So I'd love to have you come back and talk to us about how that went and maybe start looking at how we make sure we hold them accountable and those jobs materialize and we begin to save the planet.
I would love to be back. Thank you very much.
Erica Hammond, I appreciate you taking time for us. Field Director for Climate Jobs Rhode Island. Make sure you check out the website, climatejobsri.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. What do you think? Invest in the future, create good jobs, have a sound economy. Sounds like utopia. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this.